sleepwalking into dictatorship in the United States. Dictatorship. Is that what we would have if we re-elect Donald Trump?
I think it's a very, very real threat and concern. And I don't say any of that lightly.
It seems crazy to ask this and even crazier to fathom it. But do you believe if Donald Trump were elected next year that he would try to stay in office beyond a second term? That he would never leave office?
There's no question.
You think he would try to stay in power forever?
Absolutely. I mean, he's already done it once.
There's no question. He's already done it once. Cold, hard facts. Joining our conversation, MSNBC legal analyst, former top prosecutor at the Department of Justice, Andrew Weissmann's back with us, and MSNBC columnist and contributor, Charlie Sykes. Andrew, I'm glad you just gave in and agreed to be here every day after yesterday. That was a close call. Your thoughts about what we woke up to this morning and the prospects of legal accountability.
You know, in many ways, we are living through Bush v. Gore, but it's not something that's hitting us straight in the face because instead of a decision on black and white that says this is now who the president is, this decision gives this little glimmer of hope that maybe this trial will happen. But I think that this, as my colleague and our colleague Joyce Vance said, you know, the stars and moon and sun have to all align and everything has to come into play for there to be a trial and where the facts will actually matter. And we don't have Donald Trump just spinning the public, you know, which is sort of an extraordinary position. And I think the Supreme Court has sided with Donald Trump on this case. It's obviously going to side with him on the Colorado case. And to the point that Liz Cheney was asked about what could we expect, obviously Joe Biden, you know, still obviously win the election and Donald Trump could still win. But I really don't have hope as to who would enforce the constitutional mechanism that there are only two terms. Is it going to be Congress? They seem to be fairly ineffectual when it comes to impeachment, even blatant examples of illegality. Is it going to be the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court just issued a stay in this case without actually reaching any of the legal conclusions that you need to reach a stay. They basically kept the Judge Chutkan case on ice, but they didn't do any of the things that the law requires to find that a stay is appropriate. You're supposed to go through all sorts of factors, including that you have a likelihood of success and that there would be damage. They didn't do any of that. They just issued it. So the real issue is where are the checks and balances? And the one thing we know from somebody like Donald Trump from the first time he was president is you definitely need checks and balances with any president because of the extraordinary power that the presidency has. But you particularly need it when you have a president like Donald Trump.
Andrew, where does the, I don't even know if this is a question with an answer, but where does the ambivalence on those legal questions come from? Is that the natural extension of a Supreme Court so walled off from public opinion and accountability and ethics that it does something outside its own sort of legal norms, issue a stay without any of those preconditions?
Well, I can give maybe one answer that is the best case and one answer that's the worst case. And it may be that for certain justices, you know, one or both of these things could be in play. The best case scenario is that certain justices said the date of the election and what goes on with the election and whether we're supposed to decide this quickly or not is not before us. We're going to sort of decide this like any other case. And if it so happens that the trial is before the election or after the election, that's not something we are going to focus on at all. We see a potential legal issue here. And we're going to just do this in due course in the sort of plodding way that we would. In other words, trying to keep blinders on as if the real world doesn't exist in the world that you were just discussing with Officer Dunn. That's one potential answer. The other is that this is a world of politics where people know what will happen to the legacy of the Supreme Court in terms of having more nominees of a certain type and solidifying, if not capitalizing on what is a 6-3 majority in most significant cases, and that is animating some of these justices. What I would just say to that is that, be careful what you wish for, because one of the powers that the other branches have is to restrict the power of the Supreme Court going forward in the way that we've seen has happened and has been extremely controversial in Israel. So I think those are two potential almost sort of polar extremes as to what could be going on that animated what the Supreme Court's doing. Of course, by the way, just to be clear, there is a third group, people who thought on the Supreme Court but were in the minority, that they should not be taking this case at all.
Charlize Sykes, we launched on Monday a series called American Autocracy. It Could Happen Here. And we kind of gut checked ourselves, right? Too much? What do you think? And we thought, Ian Bassin and others, Liz Cheney in her brand new book and in her interview with Savannah, certainly detail enough examples of things Trump has done, things the Republican Party either acquiesced to or is now enthusiastic about, that are straight up authoritarian tactics. And now you have Andrew Weissman, a revered legal mind and lawyer, saying, one of the things that we have to contemplate now in America is a Netanyahu-like power grab over the courts. I mean, here we are. And I guess my question for you is, here we are again. We are always here, right? Mueller does a pretty restrained look at Trump's conduct. Trump gets away with not being interviewed. Mueller gives his stuff to Barr. Barr smears it, lies about it, distorts it. Trump claims victory. So fooled once, okay? That's on him. But, impeached twice with the Republicans going along, even though they thought there were clear abuses of power, then investigated by... I mean, we are always in the same place where the facts really are not at issue. But the question of accountability for Trump is always off the table. Where are we really as a country?
Well, first of all, it's really good to have you back, Nicole. And no, I don't think we're back here again, because I don't think we've ever been exactly where we are right now. If you listen to Liz Cheney, I don't think that she's being excessively alarmist. For years we described America as the American experiment, and I think it became kind of boilerplate cliche. But the reality was it was always an experiment, and experiments can fail. They are not guaranteed. We are, in a very, very fragile moment here. And what you have is Donald Trump essentially leveraging a borderline frivolous legal argument that could grant him complete immunity. It is possible that Donald Trump will, regain the presidency, will pardon himself, will make all these criminal cases go away, will pardon the rioters, the people who tried to overthrow the government on January 6th, without any meaningful check, either from the criminal justice system or from Congress. And then you have Liz Cheney saying, look, he might not go away. Well, Donald Trump is not being subtle about what he intends to do in office. And I think that we need to understand exactly the moment we're in right now. Because if there's one bedrock principle in our system, we thought it was that no person was above the law, that there was no absolute immunity to try to overthrow the government. But look where we are right now. There's a very real possibility that we will have this election and not have had this trial. The court knows all of this.
Right.
I'm not as troubled by the fact that the court took the case as that they are slow walking it. This is not a hard decision, as Andrew has pointed out over the last 2 days. It has been fully briefed. And so what they are doing is they're creating a situation where we are in a crisis moment. And yet by doing what they are doing, they are pushing this country right to the brink of a fundamental crisis of legitimacy and of credibility, not just of the court, but of the whole democratic experiment. Because what happens if the American public no longer have confidence in Congress, no longer have confidence in the criminal justice system, no longer have confidence in presidential elections or the Supreme Court? Where does that lead us as a country? What does that mean for the American experiment? So this is an alarming moment. It's been coming, as you point out. It feels like we've been heading in this direction for a long time. But now we're faced with the prospect that, you know what? Nobody's coming to rescue us. As you and Harry Dunn were describing, the courts are not going to save us from this. This is on us now.